I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am joined by Martin Atkins of, but not limited to, Public Image Limited, Killing Joke, Damage Manual, Pigface, 9 Inch Nails, Ministry, and various other bands that we could list off. Basically, a living legend of post-punk and industrial music, and this was a thrill. Not least because I am, as anyone who has followed this podcast will know, a gigantic Killing Joke fan. I had the opportunity to meet Jazz Coleman a couple of times, Geordie, now sadly no longer with us. Never got the chance to meet Raven, also now sadly not with us, but I did get the chance to meet Youth and Big Paul Ferguson. And yeah, every time I ever saw Killing Joke play live, they were absolutely amazing. Some of the best live experiences that I've had from any performers ever. They were just incredible. And Martin Atkins was indeed part of the band at a particularly iconic and significant moment in their history in the late 80s, early 90s, when they made Extremities, Dirt, and Various Repressed Emotions. I would say one of the most intense releases that the band ever had. And part of the reason why we are having this conversation is because Martin recently put together a number of different guest performers, including Randy Blythe of Lamb of God and Justin Pearson of 31G and Def Club, to perform Extremities in Chicago at Reggies. And these performances will be happening on the 28th and the 29th of November, and you will be able to live stream the event. I think there are still tickets available, which I'll put into the description. VIP tickets as well. And so, in fact, it was Justin who got in touch with me, first of all, about covering this event, and I got to talk to Martin via email for a piece that I did for New Noise magazine, which you can check out on the website. It's actually in the latest edition of the magazine as well. And having done that, I was then very fortunate to be able to talk to Martin a second time, this time over Zoom, to talk about the event, to talk about his experiences in Killing Joke. So many great stories and anecdotes from him of his experiences with all these other bands and working with all of these characters. You know, Jazz Coleman, his time with Geordie and Raven, some really funny stories, working with John Lydon in Pill, some of the interesting stories of his time with Trent Reznor back in the very, very early days of 9 Inch Nails. Yeah, more than I can remember off the top of my head right now, but just so many cool insights from decades of experience that Martin has, and also really interesting insights about the music business. And yeah, I got the opportunity to pick his brain about various different topics. It was really, really cool. Another thing to mention, Martin Atkins is also the founder of the Museum of Post-Punk and Industrial Music in Chicago. And I've never been there as of yet, but certain cogs turned in my head during the course of this interview because, again, if you followed this podcast or you sort of know the backstory of what I'm trying to do here, this is all ultimately, in my mind, tied up with a book about DIY music that I want to, let's not say that I want to put together, that I am in the process of putting together, at least in terms of interviewing people for the book. And originally, the idea that I had for this book was that I was going to go to Chicago and I was going to work with Steve Albini, another significant figure that Martin Atkins has worked with. So yeah, various cogs turned in the course of this interview, and I realized, Martin's in Chicago. Tim Jones of Cheer Accident is in Chicago. Todd Rittman of US Maple and Dead Rider is also in Chicago. Gregory Jacobson is in Chicago. Electrical Audio is still in Chicago. There's a lot of things going on in Chicago. I think I need to get myself to Chicago. I'm going to say that in 2027, I'm going to go to Chicago. I don't know how exactly this is all going to tie in together, but that is what I have in my sights. So anyway, that's all for future. I'm just putting it out there. I'm saying it to manifest it, to make it happen. But anyway, on to the conversation with Martin Atkins. wonderful experience for me. I'm so thrilled that I had a chance to talk to him. Thank you so much to Justin Pearson for helping to put this together. Thank you as well to Rebecca for helping to facilitate the call as well. I'm going to stop babbling. I'm going to hand things over to Martin. I guess I can't play a Killing Joke song, so I'm going to figure out something from Martin's catalogue. Maybe I'll play a Pigface song. I haven't figured out what it is, but I'm definitely going to play something that he's been involved with, and I guess you're about to hear it. But anyway, other than that, you can follow me at Tom Osmond Sounds on various social media. You can go to my website, tomosmondsounds.com. Martin Atkins of Pill, Killing Joke, 9 Inch Nails, Damage Manual, Pigface, etc., etc. Take it away. Hello, hello.
How you doing?
Excellent. Great to talk to you in real time.
Yeah.
And so at this point that we're talking, it's just over a month away that you've got Martin Atkins Presents Killing Joke's Extremities. At this point, how is the preparation going?
It's as it should be with anything Killing Joke or Geordie and Raven and anything. It's equal parts fueling and some ways it's like a balm, you know, across a painful period and a painful couple of losses, 3 losses actually, if you include Steve Albini,
Yep.
who worked on the demos with me and Geordie.
Yeah.
In other ways, it's a frightening leap of faith, nightmare, multifaceted thing. Mark Gemini Thwaite has come in to play guitar, and despite the stress and the upheaval, he is 500% the right person to do it. But now, of course, I'm dealing with the logistics of a well-known guitarist from Los Angeles wanting some very specific equipment. And I'm not complaining about that at all. That's like as it should be. You don't want somebody coming in with some bullshit, Walmart, Woolworths guitar banging out a couple of songs. Very, very carefully, train spotteringly recreating the tone out of love and respect and being a fan, But it's a lot. It started with my body. I nearly died like 2 years ago. I had blood clots on my lungs, and I was in ICU for 7 days. And so that was my first hurdle. I put on a lot of weight. I was pretty sick, so I needed to lose some weight and get fit before I could even think about the beats. I started to think about the beats in February, March. And that was really difficult for a bunch of different reasons. I felt like playing those drums those beats was like a muscle memory gateway into a very emotional situation,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we rehearsed this last weekend. We're rehearsing at the museum, which is also wonderful and surprising that instead of this museum being this hands off, everything's behind plexiglass, it's this living place where I'm beating the shit out on my drums. Justin is hammering this bass rig that was used by Paul Raven, Jar Wobble, Charles Levi. We're actually using this equipment in this space. So it's a very surprising, fueling place to be.
Yeah. I mean, you know, thinking about like intangible energies, there seems somehow something really appropriate about that. If you think about, you know, just the with Killing Joke for Pandemonium going off to do that recording they did inside one of the pyramids, that you've got this example here where you're going back to Killing Joke and you've got it in this atmosphere of the museum that I guess has got all these different elements that have got kind of energy that you wouldn't get anywhere else.
Well, and there's a lot of some of the scenery that I made for Money's Not Our God, 2 miles from where the museum is and across the street from where we're performing, right? That scenery's hanging there. All of this memorabilia, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
We There's a scene in the Money's Not Our God video where Jazz pours gasoline on this cash register. And I remember we're there going, dude, be careful. What, dude? You know, because the whole thing explodes. The cops come, the trains are stopped. We're underneath the L tracks. That was across the street from Reggie. So we're going to do some kind of a everybody hold hands while we set fire to a cash register. So it's all of this stuff is feeding into it. And I have some trepidation emotionally, physically, especially because we're doing 3 days in a row with the dress rehearsals on the Thursday. We just added a Saturday show. That's a lot for me. I'm 66, you know, and but I'm just going to keep playing. I'm going to play later today. I'm going to write that on my hand. Got to try and keep playing every day. But I don't know if I mentioned this, that there was, I reached out to Jazz
Yeah.
through his management, and we had these messages going backwards and forwards. And his manager, Carlo, was like, look, Jazz is really busy with this Aleister Crowley thing he's working on at the moment. I'm like, oh, Aleister Crowley, I still have the tarot cards that Jazz and Geordie did a reading for me after my first insane day of drumming, which kind of upset me. I'm like, oh, I just killed all of these songs. And oh, we're going to do a tarot reading, you fuckers. And so I'm like, hey, I still have those cards. And she got back to me like a day later. She's like, wow, Jazz is laughing his head off, remembering that situation. It's crazy that you have those cards. And I was at a stoplight, and I raised my head to check the light, and the license plate in front of me was Kevin Walker. And like, just that's not nothing,
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, we had a fairly intense weekend of rehearsals, and we went to get a pie at our favorite English pie shop, Pleasant House, here in Chicago. And while we're sitting there, ping, Mark's phone, Mark Gemini Thwaite's phone went ping. It's like, whoa, tomorrow's the anniversary of Raven's passing. And
Mm.
so we're just getting pinged
Yep.
from all sides, and it's interesting. Yeah.
One of the things I was curious about was like the management side of things. So thinking about what you've got going on with the upcoming show, I was sort of wondering, like, how does this compare for you in terms of what you were doing with Killing Joke when you came in and you were managing, independently from actually playing?
Uh, same, same shit, different day. I hadn't thought of that actually. I think Killing Joke, I didn't aspire to manage anything. But Killing Joke put me in a situation where if I didn't, um, the band wouldn't have existed for me to go crazy behind the drums with.
Okay, so there
So
wasn't really any formal conversation about you managing them. You just recognized that this was chaotic and something had to keep things in order.
yeah, well, and it was just circumstance. I remember Spike, who was helping the band, and and there was a bunch of very helpful, well-meaning, nice people around the band. And Spike's like, fuck, there's no money. There's just no money. He's like, oh, welcome to Killing Joke. There's no fucking money. And it wasn't just no money, it was like special no money. Like there's no money and we've got a gig. We can't get the extra, all the spare equipment out of storage because they're so far behind on the storage fees at John Henry's facility. We got to pay the money before the gig to get the equipment to do the gig. It's like, okay, it was like embroidered in shit thread from the past. But so I remember Spike said to me, well, not only do we need money for that, we've got to get a bigger office. I'm like, bigger office? Like, we got an office. It's like, yeah, but you can't move for all these shirts and all these fucking flexi discs. I'm like, well, I've got an idea. Why don't we sell the fucking flexi discs, dude? And so I made a couple of calls. I'd been selling from Chicago to a distributor in London. I just called him up. I'm like, hey, you want 200 of these flexi discs, And then we sold some shirts. And like next thing you know, there's money and we didn't need a new office. So it's like, just come on. And then trying to put some shows together that made sense. Bringing the band to the States. That was a no-brainer. But then Jazz and Geordie didn't want to come to the States. I'm like, listen, I live there. I've been surprised by a couple of songs where I'm like, this is fucking great. Who is it? And somebody would say, like, it's Killing Joke, And I'm like, whoa, if I don't know that this is Killing Joke, we got to get over to the States and show people what's up, And plus, there was back then, there was always more money in the States and the shows were better. And you'd do a gig in London and there'd be some warm beer and some, chicken left out in a package for the afternoon. Whereas America was always better in terms of levels of comfort. So I think I involved Jerry Gerard, who booked PIL and Nine Inch Nails before that, and started to involve Jerry in booking and get things up and running. And then all the way to the recording of Extremities, I know that we were offered a show in Poland and a show in Geneva for like bags of money. And there was no money. Even with the deal, there was no money in Killing Joke. And
Were they still
so
going through their like contractual arguments that they had?
no, I think they'd been largely resolved and over. So
Okay.
there was just nobody, There was no label. And even once we signed with Noise International, there was enough money to make the album and a little bit, but it wasn't like Easy Street, And so everybody was like, we've got to turn down Poland and Geneva. We're working on an album. I'm like, hold on, you know, let me just work on this for a minute. And I came up with a situation where our three crew guys left London with a truck full of equipment. And I think we wanted to keep one keyboard and a guitar for Geordie and a bass for Raven, just in case we need to do some overdubs. But we were approaching the phase of the album where we were listening and mixing, and like a break away from that, I thought would be a good thing. Like everybody get a cassette and a cassette player, and let's, instead of just wandering around London, let's go to Poland and make some money while we're listening to mixes and change the atmosphere. And then we flew back from Poland back into the studio, doing a couple of days mixing, while our crew went from Poland to Geneva with the truck. Then we flew to Geneva 4 days later, did the Geneva show, and just doing stuff like that made it easier,
Yeah.
you know, you know.
And in terms of like what you came into with Killing Joke, with like the setup and the people that were working with the band, like you're talking about the crew, how did that compare to your previous experiences with PIL or with other projects that you'd had?
Well, I mean, there wasn't always management with Pill. There wasn't always crew. So it was just, it wasn't frightening. Um, it was just that the reason I'm in Chicago is people roll up their sleeves and they make things happen instead of complaining or commenting. And so it was a situation just to do that. So um, uh, that's what I did. I started to run the budgets and work with a label. And then, we're all over London rehearsing. I had a 2-hour commute from wherever they found me to stay to the place. So I put a budget together and built a floating soundproof room at the loft in Chicago, which eventually became, I bought Steve Albini's tape machines in his studio, and it became a little demo studio for us and for my label Invisible. So it was all just incremental stuff.
Yeah. And you created Invisible around about that time, is that right? Like 1989?
No, I started Invisible in '88 in New Jersey. We released three things until I joined Killing Joke, and then we released the Courtauld Talks, a kind of a spoken word double album, which is an interesting release, but kind of a marginal release to say the least. But it was interesting for a minute.
And I was wondering, because I saw this very interesting interview with you recently, and you were talking about your dad and his involvement with you playing drums when you were a kid. And you told this story about how there was I forget now if it was a show or it was like a set of shows, and he wanted to go check the place out. I think this is like when you were about 10 or 11. And so he managed to figure out like what relevant songs would be from set lists that you should practice. And then he said, right, you need to practice these songs before you go and audition. And I was thinking, that's not just that's not just supportive of what you're doing. Like that's incredibly thoughtful and from a sort of organizational point of view, very savvy. So I'm wondering, going into all the things that you were doing on the business side with the managing bands and the record label and tours and all of this, like how much of all of that kind of organizational acumen do you think you got from your dad?
Well, I mean, in retrospect, all of it. I mean, so that audition, he he talked to them. This was an audition for a band I was in when I was like 10 or 11 called Pigface. And I stole that name.
I was going to say, that's a funny coincidence.
Yeah. And he talked to some, he's like, yeah, I just wanted to check this out because my son's like 11. And they're like, wow. Like, no, he's really good, what kind of songs? And they're like, oh, Thank Christ for the Bomb, Uriah Heep. It's like, oh, okay. He went to the bathroom, wrote those down, and then went back to have more of a conversation and saw a few song titles written down, and then went out to the car and wrote those down. And so we found those albums that day. I listened to those songs and got them in my head so I could have a more successful audition. And that's exactly what I did with my audition with Pill. I just sat and listened to, there's only the first album at that point, I think. Maybe, I don't know if Metal Box had come out. But I listened to all those songs and mapped them out and did them. And I did the same thing with Killing Joke. I prepared, which musicians don't always do. I sat, listened to the songs. Oh, this is weird. I think in the case of Killing Joke, I might have booked an afternoon at a rehearsal place in New Brunswick, New Jersey, where I was living, to thrash those beats out, make sure I had it. That's why I was so upset when they pulled out the tarot cards. It's like, really?
Is this what it comes down to?
Let's check with Aleister Crowley, motherfuckers. But yeah, and that so I don't. I was thinking about this the other day. I came across all of my files from working with Skinny Puppy on the album The Process. I produced that album for Rick Rubin, and the files are what, just spreadsheets where I'm sorting through 80 ideas, pushing ideas that weren't usable out of the way, so we can keep touching on the ideas that are doable. And I wish I'd somehow incorporated those tools into the last album I did with PIL, but which was really in need of that level of organization. I can only suspect, hypothesize that that was New York 1983, and we were just all out of our minds, drinking heavily and blow, you know.
You've worked with some incredibly strong personalities, to put it that way. Like, do any of them stand out that you would say they were the easiest to work with?
No, no, I mean, none of them. But
Yeah.
it's just, um, but maybe 15 years ago, I don't know, maybe, well, if I'm going to say 15 years, I might as well say 18. So just to take Paul Raven, not to be disrespectful, but just to take Paul Raven as an example, when 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 you put a tour together with Pigface or Killing Joke or whatever, and Raven's involved, it's a 24/7 nightmare, knife fight of like, you've got someone here, like, okay, there's that, but now we're dealing with who has been calling South America from one of the hotel rooms. Well, of course, it's Raven with a pregnant South American girlfriend, but like how outrageous that we should accuse her. So there's that going on, and then he's up early, and there's 10. They're like, what the fuck is going on the bus? There's 10 shrimp po' boy sandwiches on the bus, which is like, so we're like, it just like there's worse smells you can have on a bus, but like, what the fuck? So he's hanging out with the restaurant owner. Everybody gets sandwiches. Next thing you know, he's got 25 people on his guest list for that night, because it's not only like, of course, we've had these sandwiches. So now all of those people are on the list. Raven's got a bunch of new shirts from a clothing store called Archaic Smile. They're all on the list. It's like the most expensive free shirts ever, you know. But, and at the time, this is like, what the fuck? Oh, not only do these people need to be on the list and alphabetized, but these tickets need to be paid for, you know. And this is just, there's all of this stuff is going on. But at the time, it felt like a chore to deal with this stuff. Now you're blessed to have somebody involved in your project that's doing something 2 blocks away from the venue, a mile away from the venue. But calling people in London that, well, you know, the show's in 6 weeks' time, and planting seeds and just generally being a promotional whirlwind, you know. So and similarly, whilst I had my problems with John, obviously I quit the band. I had my problems with Jazz, obviously I quit the band. But I don't have a problem, or I wouldn't have a problem going out to dinner and sitting and talking and laughing my head off with these really smart, different people. And I actually asked my students. Teaching has been very helpful to me, because I'll box my students into a trap. You know, okay, we're putting a band together. What qualities do we want in a singer for the band? Do we want them to be late? No, we want them to be punctual. Okay, yeah. Do we want them to be like sloppily dressed and fucked up, or do we want them to be like neat and tidy and smell nice? No, we want them to be neat and tidy. Okay, you know, so you end up with this you end up with a bank manager, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and after they go down the list of the things that they think are important, I'm like, when was the last time you read a review of a band saying, well, the show wasn't very good, but the band started on time and the singer was really polite? Like, they're a different set of parameters. And so I guess I'm comfortable dealing with people, which is, I guess, how, in a way, Pigface exists, you know, because I'm comfortable talking to people and dealing with people and involving them in this crazy world of Pigface, you know. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. With you having worked with Nine Inch Nails in those early 90s, I wonder if you kind of crossed over with Peter Christopherson, because I know that he also did a bit of work with Trent Reznor, and obviously like Trent was really into Coil, and so like he gave them
Yeah,
studio time. But was that also just kind of like your boxes were separated?
yeah, and my main interactions with Trent would be 86 to 91.
Oh, right. Okay. So was that like even before he had Nine Inch Nails?
No, he just had Nine Inch Nails. So we go back to Brian Brain, which you asked me about, and then I don't know if I even answered that
I
question.
think my question went off in a tangent.
Yeah. So Trent and my friend Tom Lash in Cleveland played horns one night with Brian Brain. We had a single called Funky Zoo with horns on the chorus, and we couldn't travel with the horn section. So I asked people like, "Hey, you know any horn players?" And my friend Tom was like, "Hey, I play trumpet. My friend plays saxophone." And the day after, and that was Trent. The day after that gig, Trent gave me a cassette in a laundry room at a birthday party for Michelle, who booked the Fantasy nightclub in Lakewood, Ohio. And that 5 song demo, I dubbed off a copy and got Trent his first agent, and then dubbed off another copy and got Trent his first attorney. And Michael Turok, his attorney, was his attorney for the first decade, I think. And so my involvement with Trent was really early on.
Yeah, interesting. And you ended up working with him in Pigface as well, is that right? He made
Yeah,
appearances there.
he came and did a song on the Gob album where Steve Albini pulled me aside, said, "Hey, we can save $160 on this album right now." I'm like, "Great, how are we going to do that?" It's like, "Well, do we have to fly this kid out from Cleveland?" He's like, "I know keyboard players right here in town. We can save on the flight." I'm like, "What, Trent?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, first off, he's my friend. And second off, I think he might sing on, I don't know, but he's coming out. I mean, so when Trent did Pigface, like there's a reason he was allowed to do it by Steve Gottlieb because Nine Inch Nails were nothing at that point.
Yeah.
Within a year, he wasn't allowed to do much. And even when he came out and did a couple of shows with Pigface, the Pittsburgh show, there's me, Bill Rieflin, Paul Raven, William Tucker, Enesh on stage, Ogre from Skinny Puppy, and Trent. I jumped off stage at the end of the show to walk back to the dressing room through the mosh pit, and the mosh pit was kind of empty. The club was only about 50 to 60% sold out. It wasn't a huge venue. So that's kind of an interesting thing that I've learned through the museum is that these timelines are important because they kind of inform some of the stuff, you
Yeah.
know,
Uh,
shed light on some of the situations.
yeah. One or two other things that I was curious about from your Killing Joke time. I've read um I mean, I guess it was a long time ago that I saw it incidentally mentioned that Andy Rourke of the Smiths was in Killing Joke for 3 days or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It always felt like an anomaly to me. I mean, I guess it was an anomaly because he wasn't there for long, but that was during your time, right?
Yeah. Um, before a guy called Tafe, Welsh guy called Tafe, a great bass player, came in. Um, what to me, it felt like fuck right off, right? It's still Jazz and Geordie, it's still Killing Joke, right? I mean, without Big Paul and Raven, but this is still Killing Joke. It's not going to be not going to be Killing Joke. But now we've got Martin from Pill and Andy from the Smiths. Fuck right off. And I mean, there was like there was that attitude, and I loved, still love, but one of the crew guys from that era, Phil. He's a member of the Orb now, and with Alex, and we're having a cup of tea with Andy, and it was going all right, and Phil said, can I ask you a question, Andy? Are you still having a problem with the heroin, mate? And I was like, whoa, because I'm still English. I mean, that's one hell of a question to ask somebody. And I thought, my God, how loyal, how caring, and how protective of him to ask that question, you know? And Andy's like, no, no, those days are behind me. And then the next question was, how many sugars do you want in your tea? 8. Well, and I think, you know, but so we rehearsed for 2 days, and then the news at 10 Saturday night. And I have to explain this to Americans, but bomb, Margaret Thatcher or whoever as Prime Minister, blah, blah, problems in France, bomb, Manchester United score 5, blah, 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 bomb, Andy Rourke of the Smiths arrested buying heroin from 100, like, oh, fucking hell. And I sat, you could see a photograph online of Andy with an X through his face. And I sat with Geordie. We had these photographs made. We didn't have money for the photographer, for the prints, to be in the nice rehearsal space instead of the shitty one, but we couldn't take pictures in the shitty room. And I said to Geordie, fuck, I guess we can't use these photographs. And Geordie's like, pulls out a Sharpie, we fucking can. And we sent that out. And Andy was on my list to apologize to because, it's it was funny for a minute, but like to be in recovery, or I don't even know if he was in recovery.
Yeah.
But, I had 16 years sober myself, and then my dad died. Now I have over 4.5 years sober. But to be around people that struggle, like what a shitty thing for us to do, So and Andy was on my list to apologize to, and then he passed. So I was at the Dublin Castle 2 Sundays ago, and I got to show that slide and apologize to him posthumously. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you told that story. It's interesting. I was interviewing another musician recently and was asking about some band history, and he was talking about how for him it's been really important that with various band members that have come and gone in his band, that he always tries to maintain the relationships or repair the relationships. And I thought it's really great to get that from musicians. It's like, it's not, when you're on the outside, sometimes you just like, you see faces and names and like you recognize the names, but ultimately everyone is human at the end of the day. And human relationships are obviously kind of integral to our existence.
Right. And I've made efforts with Keith before Keith passed, with Jazz and Geordie, I quit Killing Joke. And there's still a couple of things I need to explain to Jazz, but we've made efforts to repair those bridges and at least keep them in existence, and that's why I reached out to Jazz, not to ask for permission to do Extremities because I don't need it, but to let him know I was doing it and invite him to come along if he wants to come along, have a cup of tea, sing a couple of songs. I'm not asking help. This is I'm like, no, I'm doing this. If you want to just come, I'll fly you out. I'll give you some money. Grab a microphone and sing a song. It would be lovely to have you. It would also be the correct thing to do. We made this music together. There's only 2 of us and Johnny Bechtel that are around. It was the right thing to do, and I think it's important. It's important to do that. I mean, I'm fucking 66. I don't need to think through the repercussions of opportunities missed because I'm surrounded by them.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you one last question relating to Killing Joke. Having brought up Steve Albini, who also I'm a huge admirer of, and it's a great loss that he left so young. I was kind of fascinated to know what the dynamic was like with you and Geordie and him, because I've read sort of secondarily that Killing Joke were an influence on Albini on Big Black, but I've never actually seen him mention them in interviews. So what was that like between the 3 of you when you were rehearsing or indeed recording with him?
But so yeah, you could hear, I could hear Killing Joke in Big Black for sure. I think I heard some Big Black in the Extremities demos because I played against a drum machine as a thing, not like drum machine as a guide. I was playing cross rhythms with a drum machine. I think he loved who doesn't, what guitarist doesn't worship Geordie Walker, uh, and Keith Levine. So there was all of this stuff was built into my relationship with Steve, I think. But without let me tear that down in case I built it up. He was always asking me for my drumsticks. God bless him. He's such a fan. Here he goes again. Do you have any more drumsticks, Martin? I'm like, oh my God, you know, and it's getting a little bit embarrassing. He's fanboying out. And then one day we're at 4th of July celebration, and Corey from Touch and Go had a label called Quarter Stick, which is Quarter Stick of Dynamite, because they were all just mad pyros. And they were just like, they'd have like rocket fights, just shooting rockets at each other. Like, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And blowing things up. And then here's Steve with an armful of my sticks. I'm like, there he goes. There he is. And he put them on the barbecue. He was using the hickory to smoke the meat. I'm like, oh my God. But so I enjoyed my relationship with Steve because I think sometimes I thought he was just a fuck. He was like a crotchety old fuck. And he knew that I thought that. And he thought I should just shut up and drum in a band. And he loved my drumming, but he wished I didn't have a label and I would just play the drums. And so we were at his house on Francisco Street with the demos. We were at Chicago Tracks recording for Pigface Gub. And then we were at Pachyderm where he did Nirvana for Murder Inc. So for as much of a in the touch and go camp as he was initially in those first couple of years that we were involved, like he was also in the Invisible Records camp and a little bit the Wax Tracks camp as well, I guess. Yeah.
No, that's great insight.
He is missed. He is
Yeah.
missed.
I wanted to ask you about Tour Smart. How did that come about?
I started teaching by accident. I was putting these big tours together, 3 buses, 20,000 promotional CDs in a specially printed cardboard envelope, 80,000 promotional postcards with 10 different partners, Jägermeister, blah, 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 blah. I mean, big tours. And somebody said, you can go and get these things called interns from Columbia College, Chicago, which is 3 miles up the street from what used to be Invisible Records and what's now the museum. And so I went to Columbia, did a little presentation. This is why you should give me some interns. They could help stuff envelopes. And somebody said, when can you start? And I said, I can put interns in my car now. And they're like, no, when could you start teaching? And I'm like, teaching what? Because I left school when I was 16. I have my master's degree now, but I left school when I was 16. I'm like, teaching what? They're like, you should teach the business of touring. I'm like, what the fuck? And I think I had 2 kids then. I have 4 now. And I just thought the wildest punk, crazy, parent responsible thing I could do was like, yes, So, and I thought that was the opportunity. I go into the first class. I'm like, what's the book? What are we supposed to do? And there was a book written in 1961. I'm like, well, we can't use this. And I just started to write classes and material, and that became Tour Smart. And that came out of punk DIY, like, who the fuck am I to write a book, and let alone publish then my own book? But I just did it. And then I thought that was the opportunity. It became a Amazon Music Business bestseller. But that wasn't the opportunity. I start getting asked to speak. I did 13 years as featured speaker at South by Southwest. I went to Norway 5 times. I keynoted Melbourne Music Week in Australia. I mean, just pretty interesting example of just walking through doors that are open instead of banging on doors that are closed, you know. And yeah, it just grew from there.
How much do you think the opportunities are different now, or the challenges are different for underground bands that want to do their own tours compared to whatever, 20, 30 years ago?
Um, but I think I don't mean this how it's going to sound. I think everything's exactly the same. Like, you need to be as different as we were then from the norm then. You need to understand what's going on so you can be different from the norm. You need to know that Spotify doesn't mean a shit, that there's no money there, and make your own stuff, manufacture your own stuff. We're almost to the point now of we're going to stop selling online. You're just going to have to drive to the museum from Belgium if you want this vinyl, you know, just going in the opposite direction. I mean, things are easier now because there's the internet. I used to book shows from payphones, like North American tours from London on payphones. Not even a suggestion of the internet. And then booking, once I moved here, I booked tours 6 to 8 weeks ahead with rolls of quarters from payphones at gas stations. And so, you know, like my skill set there enables me to have 28 people come out on the road with Pigface, 7 drummers, 3 bass players, you know, just make this insane situation that shouldn't work. But there are still these obstacles that musicians think I'm great at my instrument. Who gives a fuck? There's 74 million guitarists in the world. What's your plan? You know, it's not enough. I tell my students who work in the studio, great, can you pull a cappuccino on a $7,000 Marzocco espresso machine? And they're like, I'm a platinum certified Pro Tools. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you are. I don't give a shit. Can you make a cappuccino? Can you screen print? Will you pick up a broom or a mop? Those are the things that interest me. Can you make pancakes? Like one of my engineers, we did a whiskey pancake brunch, and it was like we desperately needed pancakes, and my engineer's just like, and I took a picture of my engineer making pancakes, and I show that to students. So whatever the external obstacles are, I think there's more than enough internal bullshit, mythological obstacles inside of everybody that prevents them from just getting on and doing it, you know? And I start to look at tours now. I see garbage just saying, we can't tour, it's not feasible. Sit down, I'll sit down with you for 2 hours. I'll set your fucking heads on fire. Run your business, you know. Pomplamoose, it's run by the guy who started Patreon. I've forgotten his name. They lost $12,000 on the road. We've lost 12,000. They give their business manager 10 grand. Like, well, take that back. Like, you're paying a business manager, you just lost this money. And I got tired of criticizing them. And I did an open Zoom, and I just challenged myself over 3 hours. And I made them over $300,000 profit in 3 hours from the situation that they described. And it was not, there was nothing wild. I mean, I think people assume when you say they lost 14 grand, I made them 300, that my solution would be 2 members of Oasis guest on guitars, and now you play stadiums. Elton John plays bagpipes. Boom. It was 25 small things. That's all it was. So I see lots of 80s bands not embrace VIP ticketing. People are used to what they're used to. They're used to the convenience of knowing they get to say hi, take a picture, get an autograph. And I understand that's not right. Just because someone has $300, they get a VIP. Yeah, but you don't have to just take that money and buy gold bars. You can use that money to give people who can't afford a general admission ticket a free fucking ticket. You know, but the last thing you do is leave that money on the table. So we have all of these things that we do that if a band can get their head around that stuff, that they can succeed and find out over the course of 3 to 7 years what success actually means to them. You know, for the Rollins band at one point, it was playing somewhere like the House of Blues with showers, decent food for the vegetarians and everybody else, comfortable, clean dressing rooms, and a fantastic sound system. Like, if we're going to do this to a smaller audience, let's at least have it sound good and feel good on stage. For some people, it's just being out there doing it, you know. So you get to define what success is, because there were times in my life when my idea of success was 100% formed by everybody else's idea of success.
That's a brilliant insight. I love it. There's one last question that I want to ask you, because you brought up the possibility of closing the online store. This is something else that I'm very curious about at the moment, is for instance, the impact of shipping costs. So with that or whatever else in mind, what do you sort of see as the state now or the future for physical media in music?
I think that it's everything. I think it's initially making something physical is it's like if a band was a startup, and most of them are, this would be a management whitewater rafting exercise for management. Would be going on tour, but before you go on tour, create some physical product. And maybe that's sandpaper sleeves, thank you, Doriti column, hand screened, signed and numbered, scratch and sniff, glow in the dark stuff, which we do. So you'd start to define your brand when you make a physical object, and you're like, what should it look like? What should it feel like? And then that goes back into your brand. The next song you write, you've decided that you should be gritty and gouge the skin to the touch, so that visualization translates into the next guitar riff you do. So I think that physical goods and the art of manufacturing is another way for bands to personalize their stuff. Not the least just a signature, but the signing in, the numbering, the embroidering, the crocheting, whatever it is that's special about you, and everybody's different. Put that into this thing, you know. At some point, I want to lathe cut X-rays, which is, they did that during the Second World War for jazz music in Poland. You know, X-rays are just plastic, and you can cut grooves into them. Okay, look, that should be interesting. It's not for every band. It's not for your average folk band. Here's an X-ray of someone's smashed face with my song on it. But you know, I like to hand type things. I have 5 typewriters over at the museum. We're using them all the time. And I like the sound that a typewriter makes. So you just keep doing things differently, and things get more different. So you're defining and refining your brand, and you're also making it sellable, more desirable. But at the same time, because you're in control of the means of manufacturing and production, you can decide to, like, this thing cost me $2. I know it's selling for 60, but here, why don't you have one? And because you've grown this limited edition mindset, almost an art gallery approach, and here's this thing that's got a label sitting on the shelf, $60. You can decide to give that to somebody. And it's just this interesting exercise. It's like, look, I just made this thing. Here you are. Look, I just made this thing. It's on the shelf for $60. Here you are. It lends I don't know, a frisson of it adds a different level of value to some of these transactions, I guess. So the further I go down that entrepreneurial art gallery dynamic pricing model, there's only 10 left. Let's double the price, you know. But 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 that could be easily construed as like, what a breadhead. No, I'm here to do things to make money, to be desirable, to be rare, to be an interesting commodity, to help fuel some of this other shit that we want to do that with people who don't have any money.
Another fantastic point. Yeah, I guess it's like idealism is valuable in certain contexts, but you have to be able to put yourself into a position that you can do the things that you want to do. Otherwise, they don't really count for anything.
Right. And if you don't put yourself in that position, then you are once again waiting for permission. It's 1974 and you're waiting for permission from a major label to offer you a deal so you can go about your business. And I'm not down with that at all.
And on that note, Martin, thank you so much. It was fantastic to talk to you. I loved getting a chance to hear some of your stories, and your insights as well are tremendous. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome. And come visit.
I will.
Okay. See ya.
All the best.